Ladies and gents, this is the moment you've been waiting for. A podcast for podcasters. This is Creating the Greatest Show, and I'm your host, Casey Cheshire. Join me as we interview podcast hosts and investigate the ingredients of a successful interview podcast. We'll talk mistakes, earned skills, powerful questions, and more. This show is sponsored by Ringmaster, completely done for you B2B podcast production. Yes, I hit the button, which means all of this magic converges into one spot. It's like a laser beam of awesomeness that is about to go down here. I can't wait to introduce my guest to you today. She is an absolute badass. She is a content marketing mastermind and podcaster. She's worked with all sorts of brands like Eggo and Rice Krispies and Blue Cross and Continental, McDonald's. But now she's bringing it to the enterprise SaaS world, the tech world, and all sorts of places. She is on the move and on the rise. Co-host of That's Marketing, Baby, Jess Cook. Welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you. That is an introduction. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, you are just a wealth of knowledge, and you know what? We get to hang out and talk podcasting, so let's go. Here's my first question to you. This is how we start the magic, start the laser beam. It's this singular question that has so much in it. I can't wait to unpack it with you. Pull back the curtain for us on your show, Jess, and share your most important strategy for a great podcast.
Absolutely. So I'm co-host of That's Marketing, Baby. It is a weekly podcast for B2B SaaS marketers and e-com marketers. We dabble in that a bit as well. And my co-host and my co-host is Susan Winograd. She is an absolute. That's right. She is absolute mastermind in the world of like paid media, and just a brilliant, like all around marketer in her own right. And she and I really, let me back up a little bit. We met, we were coworkers. We were the entire marketing team at a company called Marpipe. And we did the Marpipe podcast, and we had a blast doing that.
Okay.
And when we both left Marpipe, we were like, we've got to keep doing this. Like, there's something here. We have a lot of fun with it. And we started to kind of look at the market, like what is out there right now in the world of marketing podcasts. And what we realized was there was a gap. There was a gap when it came to a marketing podcast hosted by two women that did not feel serious, that felt fun, like you were talking to a friend, that felt more reminiscent of a true crime podcast like format than it did a marketing podcast. And that was where we really wanted to go. So we were like, there's this gap there and we really, really want to fill it. And we think we have like what it takes to fill that. And so that was really where we started. Like, it was like, we want to do this. And there is this kind of space, this void in the podcast landia that needs filling, and who better than us to do it?
Yeah. So I love the fact that we started with some research to go, what's out there? I mean, sometimes we just sort of launch things and we're like, well, whatever. But you took that extra step back to say, what's out there? You know, if there had been an exact duplicate of your podcast in the style and the format and everything, would you still have launched your pod?
I think we would have. I think we would have had to find a little bit different format or way to go about it. I think we just would have wanted to. That's just kind of who we are and how we operate. But I think we got lucky where it was just kind of like there wasn't anything like it yet. And so we just kind of did our thing. It's not to say that we won't kind of change it up as we go, but we're in early days. Like, we launched in January of this year. It's going really well. The reception's been amazing. And when you say we did research, like, I literally did research. I took a month.
Yeah, tell me about that.
I know that women occupy 60% of marketing roles, but it felt like I was not seeing that represented in the content that I was seeing in my LinkedIn feed. And so I took an entire month where I documented every time I saw a clip from a podcast, a marketing podcast specifically. Yeah. And I documented when I saw the hosts were two men, two women, or a man and a woman. nearly 66% of these podcast clips featured 2 men.
Really?
Nearly 26% featured a man and a woman, and just under 9% featured 2 women. And I just thought that was shocking, knowing that women occupy 60% of all marketing roles. And so that
Yeah,
to
this
me said, like, there's
yeah.
absolutely space for more female-led podcasts out there.
It blows my mind, that 2/3 of all the podcasts were, like, 2 guys chatting. Oh, would they
Yeah.
both be hosts, or did that count if one was a guest? Like, if there's a
Yeah, that's
male.
a good question. I didn't kind of dig that far into it. I
Yeah,
just
fair,
kinda
but
wanted to see what
you
was
see
represented in
what
my
you saw.
feed.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So 26% of the time, it was a guy and a gal chatting, but 2 women. How also, I mean, I wonder how much is left in this. Did you ever see just, like, a solo person, or was it typically someone.
I only documented it if it was 2 people on screen. I was trying to, like, take a lot of
I
variables
like
out,
that.
right?
I
So
like that,
that
yeah.
was my method. I know it's not, like, incredibly scientific, but I just kinda wanted to see what was out there, you know? I think the other thing that was interesting was when I posted this, I had a lot of people comment and say, um, women, a lot of podcast hosts comment and say, "Women don't ask to be on my podcast at the same rate men do." And I thought that was really interesting too, where women feel they need to be asked rather than go and advocate for themselves and just ask to be on the podcast. So,
Interesting.
I know we're on a little tangent here now, but
No, it's cool
I feel
tangent,
like
I
this
like
is
this.
really important. Like, if you
It is
wanna be on a
important.
podcast, go ask
Go ask.
because odds are that host is looking for a guest.
It's interesting though, because a lot of the podcast bookers I get are just, like, terrible asks. They're
Yeah.
probably mostly for guys too, if I'm thinking about it, like, again, this is, like, completely scientific. This whole podcast,
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
the
yeah.
podcast scientific pod. But yeah, but podcast bookers, terrible asks, but then individuals reaching out. I did have this one woman sent this the best pitch I've ever seen. I should interview her on here. It was amazing, and she's definitely gonna be on the show. But you're right, most of the time, people aren't asking. Do you like that for your show? Do you like that? Do you want people reaching out and asking? Do you ask them more? 'Cause I think I do more of the
We're
asking than the. Mhm.
Yeah, we're so new. We haven't we've only done a handful of interviews.
Sure.
I would say 90% of the time it's just Susan and I have a topic we wanna, like,
Yeah,
talk
no,
about
it's
we're
fun.
experiencing right now. Um, but we are very conscious of when we have guests, who they are and that we're not asking the same type of person over and over, because there's just so many perspectives out there and so many different ways to tackle marketing. Um, and yeah, that's really important to us.
Yeah, because I think at least the one thing you can take control over is, as a host, who you ask, like, if you
Yeah.
make that a thing. And long ago on my marketing pod, I just made it a thing where I was like, I need to learn from everybody. If I was sick of being in this, like, the same Salesforce echo chamber over and over
Yes.
again. So I was like, please bring me some. And I remember one time someone on Twitter was like, I'm the Beyonce of marketing. And I was like, okay, let's go. We got to chat, like,
Yes, I need
anyone
to
who
talk
says
to you.
that, I need to chat with you. So yeah, getting different kinds of perspective. But that's interesting that the stats would show that. I also wonder, are women asking women to be on the show too?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But you
It's a great
decided
question.
there's a gap. There's like and that's some great, again, scientific research, but uh that's some great data. And so you were like, what's going on? There's a
Yeah.
serious gap here, especially if most women are, most of marketers are women, 66% at least, or
Yeah.
60%, then we
60%.
should have, like, let's go. So you went off and
Right?
created that.
Yeah. So we went off and created it. We were one other thing that was really important to us was the name.
Oh yeah, okay.
We wanted the show to immediately uh sound fun, um convey the attitude and kind of the, like, sass or sarcasm that we envisioned being part of the show.
Yeah.
So, we took a weekend and we were like, "All right, by the end of this weekend, we're gonna have the name." And we texted back and forth all weekend long. I think the funny thing about Susan and I, we've only met in person twice. She lives in Richmond, Virginia, and I live about an hour
Really?
north of Detroit, Michigan.
Oh,
So,
wonderful.
this is done all, like, via text and Zoom. What a time to be alive, eh? But,
Seriously.
um, yeah, so we just shot a bunch of names back and forth. Um, we kinda, like we were trying to make it, like, kind of fun and, like, we wanted to feel like everybody could be in on it. It wanted to I don't know, we just wanted it to feel different than what's out there, right? A lot of the podcast shows are like the B2B marketing show. They're very straightforward.
So
And
totally.
we want a little bit attitude, and so where we landed on the name that weekend, that's Marketing Baby. It was actually something that I had remembered Susan said one time, when I was kinda talking about, like, attribution is so hard and, like but it's so amazing when you, like, see something that works, and she was like, "Yeah, that's Marketing Baby." And, so it was like that I love that, and it instantly conveys, like, it's not stuffy, it's fun,
Right.
it's for everybody, and so, yeah, that's where we landed.
Super cool. You were deliberate and intentional about wanting to convey the fun. And I
Yeah,
think you definitely accomplished your goal as a listener, because I get the sense, oh, it's not, the serious, let's wear our business formal clothes and,
yeah.
you know, but I don't know. I'm sure there's a place for that somewhere, but
Oh,
you want to
yeah,
create the
absolutely. Some
show
of my
you want.
favorite podcasts are, like, nitty-gritty details and, like, getting into the thing, but sometimes you just need something a little more lighthearted.
Right? You need to be able to pick and choose where your attitude is. I mean, I've got pods I'll listen to if I wanna geek out, and other times I just wanna bro out. I wanna just
Yeah,
go mindless, and sometimes I wanna go super mindful, and
yeah,
yeah, I think it's okay to just say, like, "Look, your listeners aren't like your buyers, aren't like a one-track mind. They have different moods and flows, and sometimes you will listen to, Casey and Jess be crazy, and sometimes you wanna get all serious and talk
yeah,
about B2B marketing funnels?"
exactly.
Right.
That's right. For sure.
Okay. So you did the research, you got the name, and then what then in your launch process? Where do you go from there? Do you just start recording or what? How does it develop?
Yeah. So we are big planners, she and I, and we can get, if she and I sit down for an hour, we can get 3 months worth of planning ready to go. So, we sat down, we figured out what are the topics we wanna talk about?
Yeah.
How can we so she and I are both moms, we both also have full-time jobs, so this is like a side project. Like, how can we make this manageable, while with all of that kind of, going on as well? So we knew we wanted it to be kinda short and quick
Yep.
and also super actionable. Like, we wanna be able to give people things they can turn around and try tomorrow at work. And so those were kind of the guardrails. And the other nice thing is she and I have a great yin and yang. So I have a ton of like content and brand and like organic experience. And she has a ton of like paid and amplification and distribution experience. And so that's a really nice little, like, we can kind of bring a lot of people into the fold. And
Yeah.
believe it or not, there's a ton of marketers out there who do all of that, right, on a very small team. So, they're looking for anything to kind of give themselves a leg up. So, we know our listeners really well. She and I had already built a decent following. She'd built a great following on Twitter. I'd built one on LinkedIn. So we kinda knew, like, we had some ears and eyes, that if we started this thing, we could get a decent launch, going,
Yeah.
and, we'd be able to get some great feedback on it as well. So, we know with a bit of planning under our belt, we just kinda started recording. We also decided to start, we weren't gonna do any video. We wanted to make it very easy on ourselves, just audio, just to get started. Um, we were really only gonna kinda promote it on our social, channels of choice, just to kinda make sure there was like, "Hey, we love doing this, but, like, do people actually wanna listen?" Um, and we set some goals for ourselves in terms of like, "All right, once we get, 6 months into this, what is success? Like, what would mean we should keep going? And we ended up hitting those goals. We wanted it to be a weekly podcast. It ended up being about a every 10-day podcast, life.
Sure,
And
totally.
again, it being kind of a side project. Um, but it did really, really well. We amassed a decent number of like monthly downloads and subscribers, and it proved to us like this is viable. People want something like this. So let's keep it going. We ended season 1 at the very beginning of this summer because, again, we're moms, the kids were gonna be home. We we knew it was gonna be a little harder to have some quiet time, and we thought, "Let's take the summer and really dig deep and start planning for season 2." So, that was kind of the start of it, and season 2 just started at the beginning of September, and we're right back into it, and it's so
Wow.
much fun. We really have like a good groove now. The it's growing. We look at the numbers now and they're even better than they were before, which is
Jeez.
like, don't let anyone tell you you can't take a break from a podcast. You can take a break from a podcast. You can do a little, between season hiatus if you need to. The listeners will come back. And that was exciting to see.
That's a scary thought, right? If I stop doing this, then all of that hard work of finding these few amazing people who actually want to listen to me for an hour, will be
Yeah.
gone, but they
Yeah,
won't.
and I would say if the content is good, they
Yeah.
will come right back. They will come right back
No,
and they will
very
grow.
good. So many things I want to ask you about from that. One, I heard setting a goal before you even began because, so many people pod fade, right? They get going and then it's just not meeting their expectations because it's hard work and it takes a long time and maybe no one's listening. So, thinking back, do you remember what kind of goals you set for yourselves for like 6 months or
Yeah.
they like certain number of listeners or what kind of?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So we had, a certain number of we were looking for subscribers, kind of certain number of
Okay.
subscribers, certain number of monthly downloads, um, certain number of followers on LinkedIn because we started like a page for That's Marketing Baby on LinkedIn. Um, and then average podcast downloads per episode. So kinda we're just splicing the data a couple different ways, right? A lot of those have some overlap, but we just kinda wanted to see what that looked like and if, like, if those numbers could continue to grow. So those were kind of the goals we looked at. Um, I'm sure they're relatively modest in terms of, like, what, Dave Gerhardt is getting with Exit 5 and things like that, but
From the woods.
right. Yeah, exactly. But for us, for just starting out, having no paid presence, for
Yeah.
just using our own kind of social channels, we were really, really happy with the reception we saw and just the feedback from people. Hey, I've never heard anyone explain it that way before. I've always wondered how that worked and like was afraid to ask, or I'm, like, new to this, and the way that you all explain things makes me feel not dumb, thank you. And so it was
Wow.
things like that where Susan and I had both felt that before. Like, there are a lot of things that can make you feel really stupid or really scared to ask a question or, like, "Shouldn't I know this?" or "Is this, like, obvious to other people?" Right? And so, I think we're also not afraid of being really vulnerable and talking about, like, we both have imposter syndrome. There was a point where, like, I didn't know what any of these acronyms meant, right?
Right.
So really just trying to break it down to a level, where people feel like, "Okay, yeah, this is for me." Like, I I'm not alone in not knowing some of this stuff,
Wow.
which is great. So I think that's part of why it's grown so quickly and has done so well is we're just real.
So real people, but also I'm hearing really helpful too. Like you really
Yeah.
are helping people and they must be spreading the word amongst each other.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We
Fantastic. 'Cause
get,
so many people get that wrong or don't ever get that to click. They're just
yeah.
talking and then they record it and then no one listens.
Yeah. Yeah, I think again, the content is there, the rapport between Susan and I is there. People feel like they know us. We hear that all the time. Like, "I feel like I already know you." And we love that. We love hearing that. The other thing we started kind of during our break this summer was a newsletter. So That's Marketing
Wow.
KB has an official newsletter called Rants and Raves. It's a weekly newsletter.
Heck yeah.
And it just kind of collects all the things we don't get to talk about every week. Susan and I each have one rant and one rave, like something we love and something we loathe in the world of marketing right now.
Wow.
And so that's now part of the goal too, is like, let's grow that thing. So we're kind of using it all as a little bit of an ecosystem, right? We're promoting it on our LinkedIn page. We're both promoting it in our social channels. We're using the newsletter to promote. We're using all of those channels to then promote the newsletter.
Right.
So yeah, it's like a really nice little couple double flywheel. I don't know, Venn diagram of a flywheel kind of
Makes
going
sense to
together.
me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
promoting it across multiple channels, across multiple people.
yeah,
Well, I wanted to shift it because Susan is obviously a VIP. She's a rock star. You guys are working this
yeah,
thing together. Can you talk to me about co-hosting? Did
yeah.
your was it Mar Pipe?
Marpipe,
Which is a weird name.
Marpipe. Yep, I know.
I think
It, like, stood for something. It was like an acronym, and then
yeah.
they, like, just kinda, like, pretended that didn't happen, and then it was just
I like
Marpipe.
your new one way better. So did you have a co-host on that show too?
Yeah, she and I were the co-hosts. So
Oh, you
that was a
both were.
company we worked at together.
Got it. That's how you probably
And
met it.
the software was for, creative testing for digital ads.
Oh,
And
cool.
so she and I did that podcast because we're both marketers. We both have,
Yeah.
ad experience. And yeah, when we left there, it was like, man, that was fun. We just got to keep doing that.
Yeah. Have you ever gone back and listened to like Marpipe episode 1?
I haven't. I'm afraid. I'm very afraid. I'm afraid to go back and listen to That's Marketing Baby episode 1.
You know what? You
Because
totally
you
should
just get so much more
sometime.
comfortable, as you go, you know?
Totally. And I went back and listened to my marketing pod, the Hardcore Marketing Show, see like episode 1, right? And I I looked back on mercy and humility to myself because I was like, you didn't know
Yeah.
any better, but I definitely violated a lot of the rules I would teach people to not do these days. But it's a thing. But the reason I ask is because you've had so much experience working with a co-host. What are the pros? What are the cons? What have you been able to figure out over time on how to work together on this thing? How not to jump on top of each other and all the stuff that you could imagine could happen.
Okay, a couple things. One, huge pro is the accountability. So she and I think if I were to do this alone, it would fall off my radar. Like, I would wanna keep it going. I would try my hardest.
Yeah.
But it's a lot. It's a lot to keep all of those kind of balls in the air. And so she and I split the responsibility, right? Like we have someone who cuts the podcast for us, both audio and the full length video. So she gets all of the files to them. Once those are done, she sends them to me and I'm uploading them. I'm getting them, published. I'm finding clips and using Descript to cut a couple clips so that we have something to promote on
Right.
our channels with. Um, we both do our part to write the email. I'm typically the one that goes in and edits. She's the one who's like creating the graphics for things, right? So it's like we split it very, very evenly in terms of the workload. So I think that is a huge, huge plus. You're not doing it yourself. Um, I think another plus is you can get a lot of you can get, 2 different perspectives on something.
Yeah.
We don't usually disagree because we've kind of been through all the same things and have done this for a
Right.
long time and kinda know what's what. But, we might be able to at least add on to, "Hey, that made me think of this," right? Or, "I have a story about that an exact time that happened to me." And so I think it's just like a really nice, like it's almost like improv, like yes and, right? Like you're
Yeah.
always layering on top of each other's stories. We definitely jump on top of each other in terms of like we get so excited sometimes we're talking over each other. Magic of editing can cut some of that out.
Get it
I
out.
think
Yeah.
something that really helps with that is before each episode we're creating an outline of exactly what we're going to talk through, who's going to kind of own this or at least lead this part. And you get very good about like just bringing in some pauses, right? Like being when you get done talking, you're kind of waiting making sure the other person doesn't have something else to say, and then moving on. Because again, you can edit all of that silence out. But you want to make sure that, each person gets their say. We are a pretty short podcast. Like, we try to keep everything under, I think our longest episode's 37 minutes. We try to keep everything under 30. One, because again, it's a side gig.
Right.
Two, we know a lot of our listeners are busy too. Like, they're usually listening to us, I like to call it, on their hot marketer walks. They're like, they're taking their quick break for the day
Yeah.
and they're just going for a walk, or they're dropping the kids off at daycare. Like, they only have, 20, 30 minutes in the car or outside. So we try to keep it short and super actionable for people. Like, every time they know they're going to come away with something really valuable, and it's not going to take an hour to get there.
Okay. This So the idea of letting the other person jump in, a little bit of a pause, the idea that you could always edit out longer pauses. So when in doubt, just we good, you good, you good, okay, we're good, we're gonna move on. But no stone unturned. Also, the idea of who will lead this part. Do you have certain, and it's like, do you alternate? You have certain things, and so you just know, like, okay, she's gonna take the reins on this particular topic or segment.
Yeah. Susan, obviously with her expertise in paid, she's always gonna take, like, I'm more than happy to, like, let her lead those sections,
Yeah,
and vice versa with me in terms of, like, organic or content.
yeah,
We're also very good about, like, "Hey, I would love to hear your thoughts on this too from a paid perspective or an organic perspective." Like, I think that's something that's really important to us, is, like, making sure we get the other person's thoughts in there, because we like it to be really, really, well-rounded. And sometimes there's just, like, a really nice way to describe or explain something. And, so we'll be going kinda through the outline before we hit record, and it's like, "Hey, this section, like, I how would we explain that?" And she'd be like, "I've got something, like, let me take that."
mhm,
So, I think part of it is just a little bit of preparation, and I will be very honest, we're not prepping for an hour before this. We're jumping on the Zoom call, or we use Zencaster, but,
yeah,
"Hey, what are we talking about today? Okay, let's talk about this. Let's draft a quick outline. You wanna take that? Yeah, I wanna take that. Okay, I'll take this. I have a little story to go with it." Like, I mean, it is pretty it
yeah.
is pretty loose, but I
That's
think
yeah,
that's why it's so fun, because it doesn't feel rehearsed. We're
right.
just going for it.
There's an underlining organization to it. There's an underlying structure, but on the surface level, you're able to be real and accept imperfectness and incompleteness,
Yeah.
but then roll with it. And so it's almost like you block out maybe an hour and then you're chatting for the first couple minutes just to figure it out, hit and
Yeah.
record, having a good time, call it a day. How do you go about I've heard several times now, you're taking responsibility for being able to present actionable items, and it sounds
Yeah.
like sooner than later. So because that's like almost like another layer to the podcast where, yeah, we're just having a conversation, but in the back of your mind is like, I want there to be action. So do you have, I don't know if you've even thought about this, you just do, but like, how do you go about trying to accomplish that goal all within the confines of, like, a conversation?
Yeah. So, we definitely build that into these outlines where it's like, okay, we're gonna talk about what not to do with email. That's the topic. And, she and I will each come up with, like, a handful of things that we
Gotcha.
each, we're gonna go back and forth, and we're gonna tackle these 6 things. We'll each take 3. And so each of those 6 things is, like, super actionable, but we kind of come at it from, like, okay, here's the thing with, subject lines, and then we're kind of giving this nice big kind of 30,000-foot view,
Sure.
right? Like, conceptual, whatever. And then we're coming down to the level of, like, but if you try this, or if you test this, or if you use this tool, it can get you XYZ. So I think we're very good about, like, starting at things from kind of yeah, just a really high level of, like, rationale and strategy, and then bringing it right down to tactics that can help build that strategy.
Would you say that your actions are almost explicitly noted in your prep notes before you begin, or do you discover them along the way?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
Sometimes it's like, yeah, I have a great example for this.
Yeah.
And then other times she'll have an example for something, or she'll be talking through a tactic or some sort of actionable item. And I'm like, you know what? It reminds me of this one time when I
Mhm.
did this, and so then we're able to kind of tack on to each other's ideas, which is also helpful.
That's the magic,
Examples
right?
also,
Bouncing back
like,
and forth.
yeah, and if you can give examples, that's how so many people's brains, like, you can explain a high level concept to people, but until they hear, like, "And this is how I implemented it before," it's a lot harder to wrap their brains around it. And so once they
Right.
have that great example, a lot of people, like 90% of the time, people can be like, "Oh, I know exactly how to apply that to my current role, and I'm gonna try that tomorrow."
Right. Jeez. So good. I love this. Everything's wonderful. Podcasting is the best. But what's the challenge? Do you have any challenges you're trying to tackle?
I think the challenge, for us right now is keeping things relevant, talking about things people really wanna hear about right
Mm,
now in this moment, in this current climate, environment, whatever. Um, and growth, and just, like, making sure that we're not letting our foot off the gas, like, that we're consistently driving that value, that we aren't getting lazy or, really just keeping it at that high level so people start to feel like, "Oh, we can't, that's not something usable," right? Like, I kinda know all that in theory. So I think really just making sure we're delivering that value, um, and keeping the authenticity, like, just never feeling like we're not, real, that we're not afraid to, like, share failures. Yeah, I think those are all, like, really important right now. I'm sure this show will evolve
yeah.
as we take it over time, but right now it feels like we're in a really good place, and I just wanna continue to do more of that, because it seems like that's what people want, so we're just gonna keep doing what the people want.
Doing what they want, but at the same time, it sounds like you found the gap that not only do people want, and not only do you have the capacity to do, but something that you want to do. It sounds like you're having
Yeah,
fun.
we are. So much
Yeah,
fun. So much fun sometimes we we get distracted.
sure.
There's definitely been, I'll say at least one time where we got, like, we're talking through a topic. We're like, "Man, this episode's going great." We're like, thumbs upping each other, like, "Yeah, that was a good point." And we get to the end and we're like, "Oh my god, we didn't record that." So we
No.
have to start over and do it again. But,
Did you do the whole
like,
episode
it's
over again?
we did redo the entire episode.
Do you think it sounded better
You
the
know,
first time or the second time, do you think?
that's a good question. I'm gonna say the second time. I'm gonna say it was
Yeah,
better the
maybe,
second time when
yeah.
we actually hit record because we'll never know, and,
I know.
it'll make me feel better if I if I say it's the second time. But we do. We have a great time. We love it. The hope is someday to take this and turn it into its own media company. So
Yeah.
the vision is podcast and newsletter, but also courses and community,
Wow.
and kinda taking this thing all the way, and so that's really exciting to us. That's the goal. We have kind of a time frame in mind for when we want that to happen, probably over the next 18 months to 2 years.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so we're just gonna kinda keep adding as we go and as we can, and, we brought some sponsors on, which is really helpful. That's kind of, how we're able to get a lot of these tools and pay for kind of editing and taking some things off of our plate,
Sure.
so that we can keep growing and scaling. So that's been really, really exciting too.
Wow. How did you go about landing sponsors? I gotta imagine people are curious about that.
We were very lucky in that both of our sponsors reached out to us.
Huh.
Um, and we kinda had to, like, make up sponsorship packages. Not neither of us had really done this before, right?
Right.
And so we kinda took a look at our numbers and, what we felt was a realistic kind of price for where we were at and the momentum
Sure.
we have and the very, very tight, niche audience that we have. Um, and priced it kind of that way.
Sure.
And so and with the newsletter, we're able to offer a little bit more too. So we're
A
able to
little more
do
to it.
like yeah, podcast mention, so LinkedIn posts
Sure.
and newsletter mention as well. So it's kind of nice that as we continue to grow this, we can grow that kind of sponsorship offering as well. And then
Right.
again, can just continue to invest back into the brand.
Totally. The model of the sponsorship, because you don't have to get into specific numbers for your sponsors, but is the model based on that sort of cost per impression? Is it, number of unique listeners? Is it more, is it like lead or conversion based? What kind of model are you using?
It was more on kind of the monthly download numbers, like, we're
Cool.
getting this many monthly downloads, which means that many people are gonna hear your message, every month,
Yeah.
and so that was what we base it off of, kind of a percentage of that.
Okay. Cool. And where do you put ads in there, or do you mention them? And have you had any response back from your advertisers, your sponsors?
Yeah, we have. So our sponsors are Aircule, Ercule. They're an organic growth agency. Worked with them a couple of times. I'm actually an advisor for them. They're an incredible team,
Nice.
super smart folks. And then Teal. Teal is AI powered career growth, right?
Oh,
So
cool.
things like you're taking your resume and you're dropping in the job description of the job you're super interested in, and they are kind of like, "Ooh, you're missing kind of these verbs and these things, and you might need some more kind of, um, like proof of with some hard numbers attached to them to be at the top of the stack for this role here." So super interesting company. They're growing. They're doing some really incredible things. So yeah, we're doing kind of a pre before the show starts kind of mention for Hercule, a mid-roll mention for Teal on the actual podcast. And then Teal has a little bit larger sponsorship package, so they also get social media posts and newsletter mention as well. Um, we're doing some creative refreshes along the way just to make sure it's not like stale and people are just kind of scrolling past it every time they open the email, or jumping ahead once they get into the podcast. We've heard great things from Hercule. They've been a sponsor a little bit longer, and so they've gotten a number of leads from those who have listened to our podcast. I do have some numbers too. I use UTM codes and tracking on some of the links from our email newsletters and from our social posts. It's funny, actually, our posts about Teal are some of our most engaging posts on the That's Marketing Baby LinkedIn page, which was actually a shocker to me,
Wow.
but great. I'm really happy about that. I think that's awesome. So, yeah, getting great engagement and definitely some returns on that as well, which is awesome for them and for us.
So good. I could talk to you all day about this, all these different things, but I have one final question for you, which is, let's get in a time machine, but let's go forward. We get to chat
Okay.
again, and let's definitely do this. Maybe before this, but 50 episodes from now. So if you've done 50 more episodes of your podcast, you're that much more into the future. What do you want your show to look like, sound like? What are people saying about it?
Yeah. Oh man, this is I love this question because I get to dream.
Yeah.
Um People are sharing it like crazy, saying that they have learned so much from us, leveled up their career, used the things they learned from us to be really successful at work, boost that campaign or like hit the numbers they needed to every quarter. Um, So feedback like that would be like, ugh, amazing to hear. And I think, let's see, 50 episodes would be
Right.
probably more than a year from now, right?
Oh, more
So
than you're
we're
right.
talking, um,
So maybe
I
we're that
hope at
18
that
months
point,
away, like you were talking about.
yeah, we could be to that point. I don't know. I mean, we're talking, I'm hoping at that point we have a course that has come out that has been taken at least by a one small cohort of people who have really enjoyed it and have passed that on. Um I would love someday, I don't know if this is in 50 episodes or not, but for Susan and I to do a bit of consulting as well, like, let us kind of flex those muscles and help your company, kind of listen to your problems and your questions and give you guidance. Um, yeah, I think our the thing we love to do most is just, like, help people, because we've been doing this a while in different capacities, and we just know it's not rocket science, it's not curing cancer, but it is stressful, I think sometimes we feel like we have, um, a business on our back, like, we're the ones
Yeah.
trying to bring in the leads and make sure people know about the brand and think it's cool and think it's fun, and we're writing all the things, and we're putting all the ads out there, and we love our work, and so I I just want people to feel like they can come and learn something from us and be even better at something that they love to
Mm.
do.
So good. I can't wait. Let's see. We'll travel into the future
Let's
together.
see.
We'll see what happens. We'll stay in touch. And where can people let's talk about now where people go to get the podcast, newsletter. How do I sign up for all these
Yeah,
things?
absolutely. It's That's Marketing Baby. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, iHeart, all of the podcast places. We have a LinkedIn page. We have a YouTube page. This is
Heck
new
yeah,
now. We are now recording video, which is very exciting. So we have some video clips we can put out there.
definitely.
So find us on YouTube, and then you can find me on LinkedIn, Jess Cook, uh, and you can find Susan there as well.
All right.
And we love to connect and hear from people. So please reach out.
Oh man, we will link to all of these things in the show notes for those listening. Don't even worry about typing and doing whatever you keep mowing the lawn, just click on the link in the show notes to do
Awesome.
that. Jess, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on here, just hanging out with me. We have had our own time warp. I don't know if you've looked at the clock, but we just like dematerialized an hour almost, and it's been
I
such a
love it.
great time. So thank you for coming on here.
Thank you, Casey. I know I mentioned this earlier, but this is such a fun thing to talk about. Usually I'm on a podcast to talk about like what I'm doing at work. So thank you for allowing me to come on and talk about like my side gig, my passion project. This has been a blast.
Heck yeah. Side gig passion project for now.
That's
Until
right.
you take over this planet with, your amazing brand, and I can't sign me up already. I can see the sticker that I'm gonna put on my laptop and the water bottle, 100%.
Love
I'm
it.
in. I'm totally in.
Brilliant.
For those listening, if you learned something, go check out this pod, stay in the loop, it's going places. But if you learned something, and I freaking know you did, because I literally have 2 pages of notes front and back over here. I've run out of space. I'm in the margins and everything. If you learn like I did, then go share this episode with one person. That's thought leadership. Somebody needs to hear this. Somebody needs to, they're struggling with maybe sponsorships or filling that gap with their podcast. This is the pod. This is the episode for them to hear. Share it with them. Again, Jess, you are freaking awesome. Thank you again for being on here.
Likewise, Casey. Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone. This is it. This is the Creating the Greatest Show. We will see you all next time. And next time doesn't have to be next week. Life's too short, and we have way too much to talk about. Find show notes full of takeaways, lessons, and links at creatingthegreatestshow.com. For more information on launching your own podcast or working with us to produce your existing show, come on down to the big tent at ringmaster.com. Until then, friends, whatever you do, do it with all your might. Work at it, if necessary, early and late, in season and out of season, not leaving a stone unturned and never deferring for a single hour that which can be done just as well now. P.T. Barnum.